I'm with Heye Daun. He is CEO and co-founder of Osino Resources, and I believe it's his first time with Kitco. Thank you very much for being with us, Heye.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael. I'm excited to be on Kitco. I really am.
Can you tell us about Osino Resources to start?
Yeah, sure. So Osino is a gold exploration company active in Namibia. We've got a couple of unique aspects. One of them is that we've got some great shareholders, amongst them Ross Beatty. He's our biggest shareholder, supported us from day one. We're in Namibia, which is a great jurisdiction in Africa. It's kind of like Nevada. I'm a Namibian citizen, so I have a lot of leverage and so forth there. And we recently made an exciting gold discovery, which we are now advancing. So that's really the essence of Osino. I would say an exploration company on the cusp of being a developer.
We're going to talk a little bit more about Osino towards the end, but let's see, you've been doing this for a while, and you have been running exploration companies. Also, we've been hearing a lot about COVID-19 over in in the Americas, but can you tell us how you're dealing as a exploration company with COVID-19? What have been the restrictions that have been placed in the region?
Well, we've got amongst the most draconian limitations anywhere in the world. I mean, I'm calling from South Africa now. That's where our sort of regional head office is. Obviously, our operations are in Namibia, but Namibia is very similar to South Africa. And we have quite a drastic lockdown. So mining, or certainly exploration, has stopped. Mining is continuing, like B2Gold is one of our peers in Namibia. They continue to operate under some constraints. But for us, we basically stopped. We're all desk bound. But it's okay for us because we can ramp up the drilling later once the lockdown gets lifted, and we've caught up with technical desktop type studies, admin, etc. So it hasn't affected us yet from an operational perspective. Obviously, the whole marketing and financing side is different because we cannot travel and we can't meet banks. So this whole Zoom thing seems to be coming into its own.
How different is it per country in Africa with right now? We hear a lot about South Africa, but is it you can see it different across all of the various countries?
I think generally speaking, I get the sense that South Africa is leading the pack. I mean, South Africa has around about 3,000 cases so far, about 50 deaths. So it's still very low. South Africa has been very proactive in its approach to COVID. So they reacted very quickly with the lockdown and social distancing and so forth. So I really think that South Africa is ahead of the curve. The other African countries are, in my view, mostly following that example. So there are varying degrees of travel restrictions, forms of lockdown, although the lockdown in other African countries isn't as strict as in South Africa. Like in Namibia, for example, you can move around somewhat. But yeah, generally, there are lockdowns in place in most of those countries. But, you know, the reality is that most of those countries deal with a lack of data, COVID-related data, because nobody knows to what extent the virus has actually infiltrated the society. Just judging by infection rates, it's way lower than in North America or in Europe, but nobody knows what's going on in the gray areas or sort of behind the scenes because of low levels of testing.
Have you seen any practices that have been innovative in the way that exploration companies and mining companies have been dealing with COVID-19? Do you see any Do you see any changes to work in the way that people are going to be doing it in the future?
I think operationally speaking, not really. I haven't seen that. I think most of the innovation, I guess, has been on the corporate side, like what you and I are doing right here. Much more conference calls, less travel. And, you know, human ingenuity tends to find a way around problems. So it seems to be working. I'm certainly one of the biggest reliefs in this whole COVID thing for me personally has been far less travel. So my family has benefited. I've been able to focus on operational things. So that's been great. But we're very fortunate in that we raised $15 million just before PDAC, like in January. So we are funded, unlike many others. So I think if I wasn't funded, I'd be very concerned about the situation. But for now, I think for us, it's mostly business as usual.
Let's talk a little bit about Osino and the work that you're doing there. So on an exploration basis, Namibia was a little different where I say it has some similarities with Australia. And that also did with soil sampling and the level of sand that you have in the area that you're exploring.
Yeah, thank you. You led very well into that question. Namibia, of course, is an arid terrain. It's a semi-desert. That's why I said in the beginning, imagine it to be like Nevada or like Western Australia. So there's some outcrop, but a lot of cover, Kalahari wind-blown sand cover, and also what we call calcrete. Now, calcrete is it's sort of a cemented surface layer that's a product of evaporation. Desert, a lot of evaporation. With evaporation comes a capillary effect, groundwater getting sucked up. Groundwater has limestone, dissolved limestone, because we're in a sedimentary belt. So marbles, limestone, groundwater dissolves it, and it percolates upwards and precipitates near surface in the Kalahari sand. Now that limestone carries minute quantities of gold with it. I'm talking literally ionic size. And until about 20 years ago, even 15 years ago, it wasn't possible to assay for a gold down to that low detection limit. Now, the CSIRO from Australia, the state mining research organization, developed some assay techniques to allow you to sample down to that detection limit. And some exploration companies, chiefly or initially Gold Road Resources, which many people know, it's a $1.5 billion company, they used that and they made a discovery through about 5 meters of cover in Western Australia. Now, all we did is we imported that and we applied it to our local conditions, and it worked wonderfully. So we using this calcrete sampling, we outlined a large anomaly which we drilled and which ultimately led to this discovery through 20 meters of cover. So it's been real textbook exploration combined with innovation and experience that's enabled us to make this discovery. We're very excited about it because it opens up very large areas elsewhere in Namibia which we can explore.
Stepping back, let's talk about Africa as a whole. Africa does make a lot of headlines. Sometimes it makes, not the best headlines. But when people are thinking about investing or looking at Africa as a region as a whole, is there something that they miss? Is there something that you would kind of want to explain about Africa that people might, when they're looking at it through a North American lens, what they should be aware of?
Look, I'm an African by birth. I was born in Namibia, so I'm partial to this continent, not just Southern Africa. I was born in Namibia and I live in South Africa now. But I would say chiefly perception. So, North American and European perceptions of the continent are often quite warped. So I think COVID is a great example. I often get this question, what's it like? It must be terrible down there. And I'm saying, no, it's not. It's much worse in North America or Europe. So it's funny how Africa, unfortunately, often gets tarred. All countries in Africa get tarred with the same brush. Like if Ebola happens in Sierra Leone, people ask me, what's it like in Namibia? So, of course, Africa is a huge continent. There are a lot of local differences. But generally speaking, certainly in the region where we are, Namibia is literally like Nevada. It is like operating in Nevada. It's well organized. It's peaceful. It's stable. It's got a wonderful population. It's in many respects, it's way better than operating in Nevada or in Western Australia.
There seems to be more coverage or more attention to the Africa region as a whole, as due to the work with Ivanhoe. Have you noticed any kind of lift from that?
I think generally speaking, yes, we need success. I think in the mining venture capital game, investors go to where there's success. And success typically is driven by discovery and by good promoters. So, Robert Friedland has done a great job. He's obviously been extraordinarily successful. And yes, in that regard, Ivanhoe, the success that Ivanhoe has had is good for all of us. So I thank him for that. In our case, it's the same. Discovery is ultimately what drives share prices. So that's been very good for us. And if you look at our share price graph, it's primarily also driven through discovery because that's what excites people and that's what the sector needs.
You've done this before. You had the acquisition, I believe, with B2 Gold with the 180 million pickup on that. What was the lessons that you took from that experience and how are you taking that forward into Osino?
Many lessons. To me, the key is obviously good finance, like having good financial backers so that you can weather the storm, because exploration requires lots of drilling and that you can only do with strong financial support. So that was the first one. The second one is stick to your knitting. What I mean by that is our core competence as a junior is being entrepreneurial, putting packages together, raising money, doing exploration. But I think at that point, once you get to the sort of project construction stage, building mines, that's often better left to the majors. So I think that deal with B2 Gold demonstrated that too, because they built a gold mine much better than we could have ever done it. So they made us look very good. But credit to B2Gold, really have done a great job there. So I would say that's the second one. And the third one I would say is systematic work, putting the pieces of the puzzle together deliberately and carefully, step by step. And I think Osino and what we've achieved with Osino so far, we're basically a company that we built from nothing, from just an idea, is testament to that.
You have been in this environment for a while. Looks like we're enjoying some healthy gold prices right now. And I guess that is providing a bit of a lift. But can you talk about how this era, this time right now is same or similar from other lifts that we've had in the gold price?
I'm not an economist, so mining engineer speaking. When I worked for AngloGold in West Africa when gold was at $250. That's what 20 years ago. The only other real lift that I experienced in my career as a promoter was in 2008, beyond 2008, and in fact towards the end of that we built the last gold company, which we ended up selling to B2Gold. So it felt very similar. Arguably, we are in an even better environment now. If you look at the stimulus and so forth, you add up all the numbers, the degree of QE, so to speak, is multiples of what happened after 2008. So I think that's very positive. I don't know if you saw Bank of America yesterday, they're calling for $3,000 gold. So I think the environment is extremely positive. It hasn't filtered down to the juniors yet. You can see that the Barricks and Newmonts and B2Golds and the producers have all performed extremely well. But today, just before this call, I was looking at our own share price, and it seems like finally the kind of tide is turning for the juniors as well.
Do you see a diversified way of actually doing financing? Is there enough retailers that are in there for taking care of this market?
I think the retailers have been there. I mean, the last few financings that we did as Osino had a lot of retail into it. I think what everybody's waiting for is the real big generalist money moving in, because that's what's going to move share prices. I think the retailers, and especially the high net worth investors, have been there, have been investing since 2016, selectively. But yeah, we need the generalists, and it seems like they're coming in now.
Terrific. Thank you very much. I've been speaking with the CEO of Osino Resources. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.